Hi everyone, and welcome to our video titled Factoring ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is going to always equal 1. So this is our trinomial that we're going to factor, and this guy right here, this coefficient in front of your x squared term on this lesson is always going to be a 1. So you can see that on our first example here. You can see we're going to factor the trinomial x squared plus 9x plus 14, and you can see right here that the coefficient in front of the x squared term is a 1. So believe it or not, we're going to do this by grouping. In fact, all of our factoring in this unit is going to be by grouping, which we've already studied. So let me show you how this works. So you're going to start with your trinomial, and you're going to multiply the coefficient of the x squared term times the c value, which in this case is 14. So if you would take a 1 times a 14, you get 14. So we're going to jot that down over here in pink, 14. And then we're going to take the middle coefficient here, the bx here, which is 9, and we're going to write that down underneath the 14. So 1 times 14 is 14, and then 9 slides down. And we are basically going to look for two numbers whose product is 14, but whose sum is 9. So this is where you have to think of factors. So we need two numbers that multiply to 14 and add to 9. So you can pause this video and think about that for a little while. Or you may already know that two numbers that do this would be a positive 7 and a positive 2, because 7 times 2 is 14 and 7 plus 2 is 9. So check out what we do. We're going to come over here. We're going to rewrite this trinomial as follows. We're going to start with the x squared. That's going to stay the same. But where this 9x is, we're going to rewrite it as the sum of these two terms down here. So you can kind of think of this 9 over here as being like a 9x. So what we're going to do is transform the 9x into 7x plus 2x. So I'm going to write x squared plus 7x plus 2x plus 14. So can you see what happened there? The 9x just got split into 7x plus 2x. And if we combine the like terms, we're going to get right back to 9x. So now we have a trinomial written as the sum of 4 terms. And now this is going to look very familiar to grouping. So we're going to group the first two terms together. It's going to look like this: x squared plus 7x plus, and we're going to group the second two terms together, 2x plus 14. And continuing on with what we learned with grouping, we're going to factor out the GCF here. The GCF of x squared plus 7x is just an x. And then we're going to open our parentheses. We're going to divide each of these terms up here by that GCF. X squared divided by x is just x. And 7x divided by x is just 7. We'll bring that plus sign down. Now we'll find the GCF of 2x plus 14. Of course, that's going to be 2. We've already studied factoring by the GCF, so 2 will come out. And then we'll divide each term up here by 2. So 2x divided by 2 is just x. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So now we're left with this expression here, and you can see that the x plus 7 here matches the x plus 7 here. So thinking about what we learned about grouping, our final answer to this problem is going to be that common term there, x plus 7, that common factor. Remember, you look here, you look here, and what's common is the x plus 7. And if you divide each of these, let me switch colors here just to remind you, if you divide each of these by x plus 7, then what you're left with is x plus 2. And here's the cool thing. So that's the factored version of our trinomial up here that we started with. And if you want to check your work, here's how you do it. You just multiply these two binomials back together. So that would look like this. We would take x times x, and that's x squared, and x times 2, that's 2x, 7 times x, 7x, 7 times 2, 14. And now if you combine these like terms, you're right back to x squared plus 9x plus 14, which is a good check because that's what we started with. Okay, so let's try another one. I have 3 examples for this video, by the way. They should start to go faster as we move through here. So here's example 2. Very similar. Got a minus sign in here this time. We're going to factor x squared minus 11x plus 28. We're going to do it by grouping. So if you remember from the first example, and again, you can pause this. If you want to just go ahead and try this on your own, go for it. You can pause it, do the problem, come back later, see if you match me. If you're working along with me, then you know we're going to take the 1 in front of the x squared times 28. 1 times 28 is 28. So we're going to write that down first. And then we're going to slide this negative 11 down underneath it. You definitely, on these factoring problems, want to stay true to the sign that's in front of your term. So we have a positive 28, 1 times 28, and a negative 11. So we're looking for 2 numbers whose product is 28, but whose sum is negative 11. Okay, pause it, give it a whirl. If you've thought about it, then I would think you're probably doing something with a 7 and a 4. Something with a 7 and a 4. The problem with a positive 7 and a positive 4 is that 7 times 4 is 28, indeed, but 7 plus 4 would give me positive 11. So we have to tweak the signs a little bit. We know that a negative 7 plus a negative 4 is going to give us a negative 11. But does a negative 7 times a negative 4 give us a positive 28? And of course it does, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So we have 2 negatives here, negative 7 and negative 4. And if you look here, put these x's on here, you can see that a negative 7x plus a negative 4x makes this middle, and that's what we're going to replace this term with. So in order to come over here and rewrite things, we're going to write it as such. X squared minus 7x, that's this guy, minus 4x plus 28. Okay? And again, combine those, you're right back to the negative 11x. So now we're going to group things up here. So we've got an x squared minus a 7x. Bring this minus sign down. Now this gets a little finicky right here. Because this middle sign here is a minus, when we go to write what's in this quantity, to stay true to what we started with, we've got to watch our signs here. The 4x can drop down because a negative times 4x is going to take us back to negative 4x. But with this positive 28, if we put a plus 28 here, when we take the negative times the positive 28, we would be back to a negative. So watch what I'm going to do here. Negative times 4x is negative 4x. Negative times negative 28 takes me back to positive 28. So I always say when this sign right here in between these two like terms is a negative, you're going to have to change that sign in the back. You'll get used to that as you do it. Okay, now we do GCF. So we're going to factor out a GCF from the front. Of course, right here, that's just going to be an x. And we're left with x minus 7. Bring that minus down. GCF here is a 4. And you're left with x minus 7. So when you look at these two different sides here, so to speak, you've got a common factor of x minus 7. And what's left is an x minus 4. And that's your answer. Again, you could check it by multiplying. So if we take x times x, we've got x squared. X times negative 4, negative 4x. Negative 7 times x, negative 7x. Negative 7 times negative 4, positive 28. Oh, and so we combine like terms, and we are right back where we started. Factoring by grouping. Okay, and the final example. 2 negatives. So example 3, we're going to factor x squared minus x minus 20. Same idea as before, getting the gist of this now. So we have a 1 here, 1x squared. 1 times negative 20 is negative 20. And then we're going to slide this guy down underneath. This is a negative 1, negative 1. So we need two numbers whose product equals negative 20, whose sum equals negative 1. Again, you can pause it here and think. Have some think time. When you do think about it and give it some thought with your signs, what turns out happening is we're going to use a 5 and a 4, but we really have to watch the signs here. We're going to need a negative 5 with a plus 4 to make a sum of negative 1. And then a negative 5 times a 4 makes the negative 20. I don't know if I've mentioned this or not, but one thing to always remember, guys, is these two have to match. Like if this is a negative 5, this is a negative 5. If this is a 4, this is a 4. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so again, these are like my x's here. A negative 5x plus a 4x makes a negative 1x. So we're going to rewrite this term right here as the sum of these two terms. So we've got x squared minus 5x plus 4x minus 20. Again, check these, check that. Do these make that? If they do, you're good. Now we group. This is a nice one because we don't have to worry about the signs because this is a plus. We love when that's a plus. Then we don't have to worry about what we did in the last example. Okay, so GCF of the first quantity here is just an x. We're left with x minus 5. GCF here, 4. And x minus 5. X minus 5 in common. We'll write that down as the first part of our answer. The second part of our answer is what's left over, the x and the positive 4. And that's it. See how fast it's starting to go once you get used to it? And of course, once more, you can check it. If you just multiply back, you've got x times x, that's x squared. X times 4, 4x. Negative 5 times x, negative 5x. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. And when you combine your likes right here, you're right back where you started. Okay, so that's the lesson. Hopefully it makes sense, and we'll see you for our next video.